Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is leave without a scene, no long texts, no explanations, no desperate goodbyes, just gone, like you never existed in their world at all. But here's the truth most people miss. Leaving like that isn't about being cold. It's about being clear. It's about walking away with dignity, without needing validation, and knowing that freedom isn't something they give you. It's something you claim. This isn't a story about heartbreak. It's a story about self-respect. Let's talk about what it really means to be gone clean, cold, and free. When we talk about leaving someone clean, we're not just talking about walking away. We're talking about how you walk away. Most people leave messy. They leave with tears, accusations, cryptic texts, half-blocked numbers, and desperate attempts to be seen, heard, and validated. But a clean exit, it is something else entirely. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It doesn't involve trying to prove a point. It's the act of removing yourself from someone's life without needing them to witness your pain. It's dignity in motion. Leaving clean is not about pretending you don't care. It's about realizing that proving you care to someone who consistently overlooked or undervalued you is a losing game. When you're still trying to explain why you're walking away, you're leaving the door open. You're giving them access to keep re-entering the conversation and to keep minimizing your boundaries. A clean departure shuts that door. It doesn't need closure from the other person because it creates closure internally. That's power. The hardest part about leaving clean is the silence that follows. Because, let's be honest, we all want that final word. That last emotional mic drop. The message that finally makes them see what they missed. But let's also be honest about this. The people who didn't see your worth when they had you are unlikely to suddenly grasp it because you typed it out in a paragraph at 2 a.m. Clarity doesn't come from what you say, it comes from what you do. When someone realizes they can no longer reach you, no longer access your emotional energy, that is when your absence begins to speak for itself. A clean exit also protects your self-respect. Every time you send one more message, beg for one more conversation, or ask one more question they won't answer, you chip away at the image you hold of yourself. You start to forget how strong you are, how valuable you are, how whole you were before they ever entered your life. Clean means preserving that image. It means saying, I may be hurting, but I'm not going to hand you my pain like it's a gift for you to evaluate. You don't get to decide if it matters. I do. Walking away clean doesn't mean you're emotionally detached or cold-hearted. It means you're self-contained. You've recognized that staying in the situation, even just to talk it out, is no longer about love. It's about trying to manage rejection. And that's not your job. Your job is to protect your peace. A person who wants you to stay confused, always halfway in and halfway out of your life, isn't offering love. They're offering control. Clean is what happens when you choose yourself over that chaos. And here's the beautiful part. When you walk away clean, you leave nothing behind that can be used against you. There's no text to screenshot, no voicemail to replay, no messy confrontation to justify their story. They can't twist your pain into blame. They can't say you overreacted because you didn't react. You acted with grace, strength, and composure. It leaves them in the silence of their own consequences, and that silence, it can be deafening. At the end of the day, leaving clean isn't for them. It's for you. It's the first step in getting your power back, not in some aggressive, revenge-filled way, but in a calm, quiet return to yourself. It's the kind of goodbye that doesn't echo, because it was never about them hearing it. It was about you being free from the need to be heard. When people hear the word cold, they often confuse it with being heartless or cruel. But when you've spent enough time giving warmth to someone who took it for granted, being cold isn't about lacking emotion. It's about no longer offering your energy to someone who didn't value it. It's not cruelty, it's clarity. Emotional clarity has a stillness to it, a kind of calm precision. It means you've stopped hoping they'll change, stopped negotiating with their inconsistency, and started seeing things exactly as they are. That moment, that shift, feels cold, but only because it lacks the drama they're used to pulling you into. You see, warmth often keeps unhealthy connections alive. When someone knows they can hurt you and you'll still show up with softness, they don't learn. They rely on your empathy to do the heavy lifting. They depend on the part of you that always makes excuses, always gives one more chance, always absorbs the weight of their behavior. Being warm to someone who repeatedly disrespects you is not a virtue. It's a form of self-abandonment. Choosing to be cold is choosing to stop feeding a dynamic that depletes you. This kind of emotional coldness doesn't mean you don't feel pain. It just means you no longer hand that pain to the person who caused it, hoping they'll hold it with care. It means you've stopped believing that they are the solution to the very wound they created. And in many cases, this shift confuses the other person. Suddenly, you're no longer reacting, you're no longer texting back, you're no longer asking questions they've avoided answering. That silence, that change feels jarring to them, not because you're doing something wrong, but because they were so used to being met with emotional openness, even when they didn't deserve it. When you become emotionally cold, you stop over-explaining. You stop trying to be understood by someone who's not trying to understand you. You stop throwing yourself at the wall of their indifference, hoping this time you'll break through. The truth is, someone who genuinely cares will not make you beg for clarity. They won't weaponize confusion or make you feel crazy for asking for the bare minimum. So when you stop playing that game, when you step back and remove your warmth from the equation, you're not punishing them, you're finally honoring yourself. Being cold can also be a boundary. It's the line you draw when someone's had too much access to your emotions for too long. It's not passive-aggressive. It's not about giving the silent treatment to manipulate a reaction. It's about reclaiming your emotional energy and choosing to use it elsewhere, on yourself, on people who reciprocate, on peace. You no longer have to explain your silence to someone who ignored your voice. Coldness is simply the absence of heat you used to give freely. That doesn't make you bitter, it makes you discerning. Ironically, once you turn cold, that's often when the other person wakes up. That's when they start noticing your absence, your distance, your shift. But that awakening doesn't mean they've changed. It just means they miss your warmth now, that they can no longer rely on it. The mistake would be to think their recognition is a sign to return. The truth is, you weren't invisible, they were just blind to your value while they had it. Your change in temperature didn't erase your feelings, it protected them. It put them where they belong, in your own care, not theirs. This kind of emotional coldness is not a wall, it's a filter. It lets through only what's real, respectful, and safe, and it shuts out everything that once drained you under the disguise of love. It's not the absence of feeling, it's the presence of self-control. When you stop being warm to someone who kept you in emotional limbo, you're not being cruel. You're being clear about what you will and won't allow into your life anymore. And that's not cold. That's strength. Freedom is often romanticized as this sudden, euphoric moment where everything clicks and you feel light, empowered, and completely detached. But in reality, freedom, true emotional freedom, often starts quietly. It begins in that still moment when you realize you're done waiting. You're done hoping they'll show up differently, done analyzing their mixed signals, done trying to decode messages that never made you feel secure. That's when freedom starts, not in a grand gesture, but in a quiet internal decision that says, I no longer need you to understand why I'm leaving. There's a kind of power that rises when you stop waiting for closure. It doesn't mean the hurt is gone, or that the memories don't still sting. It means that your energy no longer moves toward that person. You stop circling back to conversations that never brought clarity. You stop rehearsing what you wish you'd said. You stop giving them space in your head when they never earned the space in your heart. That's what freedom is. It's not forgetting, it's unhooking. It's choosing not to chase healing through the same door that broke you. So many people stay stuck in the illusion that freedom will come after the apology, after the explanation, after they see what they lost. But that keeps you tethered. It gives your peace to someone else, as if they get to decide when you feel whole again. Freedom doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't need to be validated by their regret. It happens the moment you choose yourself, not in theory, not as a post on Instagram, but as a daily practice of not reaching back. And yes, freedom can feel lonely at first, especially if you've built your world around this person, even emotionally. You miss what could have been, the version of them you held onto in your mind, the potential you were in love with more than the reality. But freedom isn't about pretending none of it mattered. It's about acknowledging that it did, and still choosing to walk away from what no longer serves your emotional well-being. It's about saying, I can love you and still leave you, I can care and still choose myself. There's a misconception that walking away makes you cold or heartless. But walking away is sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself. You stop leaking energy into someone who isn't filling your cup. You stop giving access to someone who only takes, never gives. That's not selfish, that's self-preservation. The world teaches us to fight for love, to hold on, to try harder, but it doesn't always teach us when to let go. Freedom is what happens when you stop confusing attachment with love. Sometimes, the moment you walk away, you expect to feel immediate relief, but what you get instead is silence. It's disorienting. You wonder if you made the right choice, if you gave up too soon. But silence doesn't mean you were wrong. It means you've made space, and space is uncomfortable before it's peaceful. That discomfort is where growth begins. Freedom grows in that space. It breathes in the quiet, in the stillness, in the mornings when you wake up and don't check your phone for their name. The most powerful kind of freedom is the one that doesn't look like strength at first. It looks like crying alone, blocking them without announcement, deleting the chat history, saying no even when your heart says maybe. It's not glamorous, but it's real, and over time you realize freedom isn't the absence of pain, it's the absence of control they once had over your peace. It's the moment you start living for yourself again, no longer defined by someone else's inconsistency. You stop chasing closure, and instead you choose peace, and that choice, that's where real freedom begins. Disappearing with dignity doesn't mean you didn't care. It doesn't mean the relationship or connection meant nothing to you. It simply means you decided to leave in a way that protects your peace instead of proving a point. Most people don't know how to walk away without drama because they're still trying to be seen, still hoping the other person will suddenly understand the pain they caused. But when you disappear with dignity, you let go of that need. You choose self-respect over performance. You choose silence over spectacle. You don't storm out. You simply stop showing up because you've realized you're not seen when you're there anyway. We live in a culture that glorifies the big exit, the dramatic message, the confrontation, the emotional outburst. But none of that brings real peace. It may feel satisfying in the moment, but it rarely changes anything. If someone didn't respect your boundaries when you were speaking, they're not suddenly going to respect them because you screamed. That's the trap. Thinking you'll finally get their attention if you just express your hurt the right way. But disappearing with dignity is knowing you already said enough. You already gave them the opportunity to meet you halfway. And now it's time to leave, not for them to notice, but for you to heal. There's something incredibly powerful about choosing not to explain yourself anymore. Not because you don't have anything to say, but because you've realized your words won't land where there's no willingness to listen. That's what dignity is. It's not coldness. It's not indifference. It's restraint. It's strength. It's choosing your inner calm over external validation. It's walking away from a situation that keeps pulling you out of character. You don't need to win the argument or have the last word. The real win is your ability to leave without losing yourself. When you disappear with dignity, you don't rewrite the past. You simply stop trying to make it make sense. You accept that closure might not come in the form of an apology, an explanation, or even acknowledgement. Instead, closure comes from your decision to stop participating in your own hurt. You let go of the narrative you were clinging to, and in that letting go, you free yourself. You stop trying to change what happened and start changing how you carry it. And sometimes, the most healing thing you can do is remove yourself entirely. There's also a quiet elegance in not reacting, in not giving them the satisfaction of seeing you spiral, in not giving them access to the most wounded parts of you. That silence, it's not weakness, it's power. It's the loudest thing you can say when someone has stopped listening. You're not disappearing because you're defeated. You're disappearing because you're done performing for someone who never deserved a front row seat in the first place. Your silence isn't empty. It's full of everything you chose to say to yourself instead of wasting on someone who wouldn't hear it. People may question your sudden absence. They might call you cold, distant, dramatic. Let them. They weren't the ones sitting with the confusion. They weren't the ones who had to over-explain their feelings just to be dismissed. They weren't the ones who kept showing up while the other person stayed emotionally unavailable. You don't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace, and disappearing isn't about ghosting. It's about exiting with intention. You're not vanishing to hurt them. You're leaving to stop hurting yourself. In the end, disappearing with dignity is an act of deep self-love. You're not chasing closure, you're creating it. You're not trying to change someone's mind, you're changing your direction. And while it might not be flashy or loud, it's the kind of move that rebuilds your self-respect one quiet step at a time. You're not walking away to be missed, you're walking away to be free. When you finally walk away from someone who kept you uncertain, confused, or emotionally exhausted, there's a strange shift that happens. They often seem surprised, disoriented even. Suddenly they start asking why you're being distant, why you're acting different. But the truth is, you're not different. You're just done. You're no longer trying to explain yourself to someone who never really listened. And their confusion? That's not your problem anymore. The problem is, for so long, you were likely trying to be understood. You over-explained, you softened your tone, you gave them the benefit of the doubt, even when their actions didn't deserve it. You tried to express how you felt in every possible way, through words, through silence, through effort. And they responded with half answers, dismissals, or worse, indifference. So, when you finally stop talking, when you stop trying to fix it, they notice the absence, but they don't recognize it's the result of their own inaction. They don't connect the dots between your distance and their behavior. Instead, they make your silence the mystery, as if it just appeared out of nowhere. This is what people do when they've become accustomed to your emotional labor. They expect you to keep showing up, no matter how they treat you. And when you stop, they see it as a betrayal rather than a boundary. But it's not your job to decode their reactions anymore. You're not responsible for their lack of awareness. You gave them chances, more than one. You communicated, you tried, you showed up, and they didn't. So now that you've stopped trying, their confusion doesn't hold any weight. It's a delayed reaction to a reality you've been living in for a long time. They may start saying you've changed, that you're cold, distant, selfish, But what they're really noticing is that your energy has shifted. You're no longer available for their inconsistency. You're no longer willing to carry both sides of the relationship. And when you stop overfunctioning, people who benefited from your effort will always feel like you're underfunctioning. But again, that's their narrative, not yours to fix or explain. There's something incredibly freeing about letting go of the need to be understood by someone who refused to understand you when it mattered. When you stop trying to be heard by someone who always minimized your voice, you create space for peace. You stop exhausting yourself trying to clarify what was already clear. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong person. The thing is, people hear what they want to hear. They see what they're willing to see. And if they chose to ignore your needs when you voiced them, don't expect them to suddenly become self-aware when you leave. Their confusion doesn't mean you owe them an explanation. It means they weren't paying attention. Your clarity feels like coldness only to someone who was comfortable in your confusion. It's not your responsibility to make them understand now. That time has passed. Your job now is to move forward, not backwards into conversations that only drain you. You don't need to justify your absence to someone who overlooked your presence. Let them be confused. Let them wonder. Let them sit with the version of you they created distant, silent, unbothered because they couldn't recognize the version of you that was soft, open, and willing. You gave them a chance to meet you where you were. They chose not to. Now, you're choosing to leave them where they are. That is not bitterness, it's boundaries, and their confusion. That's just the echo of all the understanding they refused to give when you were still trying. Reclaiming the narrative is one of the most important things you can do after walking away from someone who made you question your worth. For so long, they may have controlled the tone of the relationship, how much closeness you got when the communication flowed, how seen or unseen you felt. You adjusted, compromised, and bent parts of yourself just to keep the connection alive. You made excuses for their behavior, softened your voice so they wouldn't pull away, and convinced yourself that if you could just do it right, things would shift. But they didn't, and eventually you were left not only with heartbreak, but with a story that didn't feel like yours anymore. When you reclaim the narrative, you stop defining yourself by how they treated you. You stop using their inconsistency, neglect, or lack of love as a mirror for your value. You take the pen back. Instead of asking, "Why wasn't I enough?" you start asking, "Why did I stay in a space where I was treated like I wasn't?" That shift is everything. Because it moves you out of the role of someone waiting to be chosen and into the role of someone who chooses themselves. So often we internalize the way someone loves us, or fails to, as a reflection of our identity. If they were hot and cold, we assume we were confusing. If they were unavailable, we think we were too demanding. If they left without explanation, we convince ourselves we must have pushed them away. But the truth is, their behavior was never about your worth. It was about their own capacity. Reclaiming the narrative means you stop carrying blame that was never yours to begin with. You stop writing your story through the lens of their avoidance, immaturity, or inability to meet you emotionally. There's a kind of healing that happens when you realize the version of you that begged, over-explained, waited, and gave second chances. That version wasn't weak. That version was doing their best with the tools they had. But now you have new tools. Now you know that love without consistency is manipulation. That attention without effort is a distraction. That presence without respect is not intimacy. And with that knowledge, you can rewrite the story, not to erase what happened, but to reframe what it meant. Reclaiming the narrative doesn't mean pretending you were never hurt. It means choosing to tell the truth about what that pain taught you. Maybe it taught you where your boundaries were too soft. Maybe it showed you how deeply you want to be understood and how long you were willing to wait for that. Maybe it revealed patterns you hadn't seen before. The point is, the story no longer ends with how they left or what they did. It continues with how you healed, how you grew, and how you chose to never settle again. And yes, they might have their own version of the story. One where you were too much, or hard to love, or never satisfied. Let them have it. That version served them. But it doesn't have to serve you. You are not obligated to shrink yourself just to fit into someone else's limited perception of who you were. You don't need their validation to rewrite your truth. The moment you stop seeking their understanding is the moment you truly set yourself free. You get to choose how you remember it. You get to decide what that chapter says about you, not as a victim, but as someone who survived and evolved. You're not the broken person who stayed too long. You're the brave one who finally walked away. That's your story now. And no one else gets to write it for you. At the end of the day, being gone like you never existed isn't about erasing the past or hiding your pain. It's about reclaiming your power in the quietest, strongest way possible. It's about leaving behind the chaos, the confusion, and the emotional exhaustion, and choosing yourself instead. When you walk away clean, cold, and free, you're not closing a door out of bitterness. You're opening a whole new chapter of self-respect and freedom. Remember, the greatest strength lies not in holding on, but in knowing when to let go with dignity. It's in disappearing without a trace, because you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone who failed to see it. This freedom, quiet, sharp, and clear, is yours to claim. So step into it boldly, walk away knowing you are whole, worthy, and free. And most importantly, walk away for you.